Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng luwalhati't pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Your Excellencies, Secretaries, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the business community, members of the press, friends, good morning. Is it afternoon? Good afternoon. I am Undersecretary Margo Salcedo from the Department of Budget and Management, and I have the honor of being your host for today. So welcome to the 2024 Philippine Economic Briefing. The PEB is co-organized by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Department of Finance. The last 2 years have seen the Philippines as one of the leading forces among Asia's emerging economies. As it continues its transformative journey to progress, the country can leverage on its strong macroeconomic fundamentals, sound fiscal policies, the vote of confidence of multilateral agencies, and investment-grade ratings from credit rating agencies to attract more investments and, in turn, further improve the job market and the economy. Joining us today, and you will hear from all of them, are the Philippines' most esteemed cabinet members and respective private sector representatives, who will discuss the Philippines' macroeconomic landscape and reform agenda to make our country a more competitive destination for investments, growth, and job creation. So, without further ado, let us now begin our program with the welcome remarks from the Governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Governor Eli M. Remolona Jr. Let's listen to this.
Partners in the business community, ambassadors and other representatives of our friends around the world, colleagues in government, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Philippine Economic Briefing in Manila. Our theme is fast-tracking economic progress. That's not just a cliche. We grew 5.5% last year and 5.7% in the first quarter. These are among the fastest growth rates in the world. We're projected to grow at a faster rate of 6 to 7% this year. So we're actually on the fast track. Our job is to keep us there. In fact, progress is not just about growth. We want this growth to improve the lives of most of our people. I commend my colleagues in the national government, particularly Finance Secretary Ralph Recto, and Presidential Advisor for Investment and Economic Affairs, Frederick Go, for their efforts and achievements in reforming tax laws and procedures and cutting red tape for job-creating investments and infrastructure. You will hear more about them and their cabinet colleagues this afternoon. We know your eyes are on the Bangko Sentral because of the stubbornness of inflation. We faced unusual supply shocks. These shocks have been large and relentless. But I think we're now beginning to tame inflation. From a peak of 8.7% in January 2023, the April number has come down to 3.8%. which is within our target range. At the same time, our banks are well capitalized and flush with liquidity. They are in a good position to continue to support growth. We continue to take proactive steps to digitalize in general and improve our payments and settlement system in particular, helping big business, small business, and Filipino families with increasingly digitalized transactions. Finally, hand in hand with the government, we are pushing on multiple fronts to deepen our capital markets. Such deepened markets will enhance our transmission mechanism for monetary policy and make our financial system more resilient. All of these initiatives are on fast tracks. We hope you'll be with us for the ride. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Governor Eli M. Remolona Jr. And now, to provide us an overview of the Philippines' macroeconomic landscape, may we call on stage Finance Secretary Ralph Recto.
Fellow workers in government, members of the diplomatic corps, development partners, friends in the private sector, and media, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you about our promising future. The Philippine economic outlook is the brightest it has ever been. And when we successfully reduce the poverty rate to a single digit by 2028, history will mark the Marcos Jr. presidency as a turning point when the Philippines achieve genuine inclusive growth for Filipinos. Let me highlight all the signs that point toward this goal. Since President Marcos Jr. took office in 2022, the Philippines has consistently become the brightest star in ASEAN, expanding among the fastest by 6.2%. Global research firms and analysts affirm our economic vigor. Despite external challenges, we are expected to outperform ASEAN economies with a projected growth between 5.8 to 6.3% in 2024. The forecast for 2025 is even higher at 5.9 to 6.5%. This trajectory puts us firmly on course to become a $1 trillion economy in less than a decade. This means that by 2033, our economy will nearly triple in size, placing us in the league of economic giants like China, Japan, India, and South Korea. And we are expected to continue outpacing the growth of Asia's economic powerhouses in the years to come. Fast forward to 2075, the Philippines will overtake France to become the 14th largest economy in the world. With our arsenal of growth-enhancing strategies, this administration has the right policy tools and determination to take us there. We will continue bolstering growth by arresting inflation through a whole-of-government approach, ensuring food security in our top priority. We share the view of the IMF that forecasts Philippines' inflation to remain manageable despite external challenges, settling at 3.6% this year. This is well within the government's target of 2 to 4%, and notably lower than the global average of 5.9% and that of developing economies at 8.3%. As inflation eases, we anticipate a further acceleration in our already robust domestic consumption. This will help us reach our 6 to 7% growth target for this year and serves as a sturdy shield against global headwinds. Our strong consumer spending, constituting over 70% of the economy, is bolstered by an increasingly vibrant labor market. All our labor force indicators, unemployment and underemployment rates, continue to decline to historically low levels and are even better than pre-pandemic. In addition, more and more Filipinos are engaged in formal and stable jobs, constituting the largest portion of our workforce. This is an indication of an expanding middle class and reinforces the Philippines' path towards becoming an upper middle income country next year. This expansion is seen to rapidly raise the country's average income per person, nearly doubling from $3,541 last year to $6,500 by 2030. As a result, the Philippines is expected to become the world's 13th largest consumer market by 2030, offering vast opportunities for local and foreign businesses. Another key driver boosting domestic consumer demand is the reliable stream of remittances from overseas Filipino workers. Despite comprising only 4% of the labor force, OFWs send home an equivalent to 9% of GDP annually. The remittances not only provide a stable income source for their families, they also catalyze the growth of small businesses in communities. Our tourism industry is another significant contributor to our economic resilience and represents a low-hanging fruit for growth. The industry strongly rebounded from the pandemic, posting sustained increases in tourist arrivals and tourism receipts. Ongoing improvements in our airports and seaports are expected to boost annual tourist arrivals from 5.5 million in 2023 to a projected 43 million by 2030, with tourism revenues rising from 9% to 22% of GDP. Our export of services also provides us with additional buffers, as it is less vulnerable to the impacts of trade wars compared to the export of physical goods. The country's business process outsourcing continues to be a strong driver of employment, with over 1.7 million people generating hefty revenues. These, along with our low external debt and healthy reserves that exceed standard benchmarks, should keep our currency stable and resilient to adverse external shocks. Our banking system is also a key pillar of strength. In 2023, the average capital adequacy ratio of banks was 16.9%, and the liquidity coverage ratio was 182.7%, both exceeding international benchmarks. This means that our banks are strong and stable and are capable of providing more lending support to businesses and individuals. Our economic buildup is further supported by a solid fiscal position, which ensures stability for businesses. With our strong commitment to fiscal discipline, we recently recalibrated our fiscal targets to ensure that strategic and growth-enhancing fiscal consolidation remains at the forefront of our agenda. These new targets are realistic, pragmatic, and proactive, accounting for various domestic and external factors. Our fiscal deficit, which has steadily decreased to 6.2% of GDP in 2023, will continue to diminish sustainably, reaching 3.7% of GDP by 2028. This narrowing deficit path is underpinned by higher revenue collections and improved expenditure management. With total revenues already reaching 1.5 trillion pesos as of end April, we are on track to meet our collection target of 4.3 trillion pesos this year. The BRR has already collected close to 1 trillion, or 970.3 billion pesos, representing a 15.4% increase from last year. The BOC, on the other hand, recorded a 6.5% growth rate in its collection, reaching 299.3 billion pesos. And we are focusing on growing our tax revenues further by plugging tax leaks and improving tax administration, especially in the e-commerce market, through digitalization, a process that admittedly will take some time. In the meantime, we have strategically tapped into non-tax revenue streams to generate additional funds without imposing new or increased taxes on our people. This allowed us to collect 188.8 billion pesos in non-tax revenues as of end April, 48.8% higher from the same period last year. The surge is primarily driven by higher dividend remittances from GOCCs. As of May, these already reached 88.6 billion pesos. Our privatization efforts are also expected to boost non-tax revenue. Meanwhile, our fiscal consolidation plan ensures that the economy will continue to outgrow our debt in the medium term. Our debt to GDP ratio further dropped to 60.1% in 2023 and is on track to decline further to 55.9% by 2028. We have been very prudent with our borrowings. The majority of financing is sourced domestically to take advantage of high liquidity in the economy. This provides a venue for ordinary Filipinos to invest and help in nation building. To ensure that we get the best value in funding our financing requirements, we secure only the cheapest deals to save on borrowing costs. For example, we recently obtained $2 billion in financing from the global bond market at exceptionally historical low rates. The pricing of our issuance was so competitive compared to our higher-rated peers, showing that the Philippines is performing well beyond its current credit rating. This presents a strong case for a potential rating upgrade. The DOF has also successfully secured financing agreements for infrastructure projects at very concessional rates and highly favorable terms. This includes the continued funding for the country's first ever Metro Manila subway project, which will be up and running by 2028. Our growth-enhancing initiatives also include directing our accelerated spending program towards more infrastructure and human capital development programs. These two investment areas will provide the highest multiplier effect in the short term and in the long term. With a median population age of only 25 years old, our greatest competitive advantage rests in our people. Thus, we are harnessing our demographic sweet spot by investing heavily in education and social services. Specifically, we aim to fully equip Filipinos with new technological know-how so we can position ourselves as the hub for technology-driven industries. We are also running full speed ahead with the Build Better More program to create more jobs that stimulate domestic consumption while boosting our competitiveness. This robust infrastructure buildup involves an annual public infra spending of up to 6% of GDP, driven by 185 flagship projects worth 9.5 trillion pesos. With the public-private partnership code in place, we expect to speed up the delivery of critical infrastructure projects across the archipelago. Currently, 125 PPP projects are primed and shovel-ready. 5 of these projects are already in the advanced stages and are slated for awarding this year. These include the Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway Extension Project, the Laguindingan Airport, the new Bohol International Airport, the UPPGH Cancer Center, and the Dialysis Center for the Renal Center facility of the Baguio General Hospital and Medical Center. Our strategy for rapid expansion is further powered by reforms that will drive investment-led growth. The current policy landscape for investments in the Philippines has never been more open and liberalized. In fact, President Marcos Jr. himself has been our primary marketer, actively engaging with leaders and investors around the world to strengthen partnerships. His proactive diplomacy has already yielded $2.3 billion in foreign direct investments for the first 2 months of the year. This is nearly 50% higher than the same period last year. The figure is expected to surge as we begin to realize the $72.2 billion worth of investment pledges gathered from the President's world engagements alone as of last year. We are aggressively addressing bottlenecks and expediting processes to realize these investment pledges, particularly in high-priority sectors. These include infrastructure, renewable energy and power, critical minerals, financial services, healthcare, consumer and retail, manufacturing, and IT BPM, among others. We are intensifying efforts to address investor concerns, such as high electricity costs, through the Create More bill. This enhances both fiscal and non-fiscal incentives and provides corporations with a 200% deduction from power costs incurred during the income tax holiday period. Create More will also incentivize investments in priority industries within the special economic and free port zones. This will be instrumental in turning the Luzon Economic Corridor into a prime location for export manufacturing firms and positioning the Philippines as Asia's top destination for cutting-edge production and innovation. Bureaucratic gridlock and red tape are also being addressed through decisive measures like Administrative Order 23. This puts an end to the systemic issue of smuggling through a digitally integrated system for pre-border technical verification and cross-border electronic invoicing. Furthermore, the President institutionalized green lanes for strategic investment. This is a whole-of-government approach to streamline approval and registration processes, as well as address investor concerns. Meanwhile, the ease of paying taxes law is a giant leap forward in creating an environment that is investor-friendly, simple, and innovative. We have now significantly simplified tax compliance procedures, reduced red tape, and embraced technology to make it easier for taxpayers to fulfill their obligations. Along with the implementation of our liberalization laws, we have removed roadblocks to clear the way for a more rapid economic expansion. But to be clear, our growth-enhancing initiatives are meant not only to create an economy that is ready to compete with the rest of the world. They are designed to harness the talents of our young workforce and build a nation where every Filipino can thrive, secure decent jobs, and create better lives for themselves. All of these are aimed to provide pathways out of poverty for about 14 million Filipinos, or cutting poverty incidence to 9% by the end of the President's term or sooner. This is the single most important number that we aim to achieve. Even with headwinds along the way, there are a lot of reasons to be confident and excited about our nation's future. So I hope you will help us spread the word. We have all the makings of a prosperous economy, and we have a bold and decisive leader to fully realize that potential. Lahat po kayo ay makakaasa na sa bagong Pilipinas, sama-sama po tayo uunlad, at giginhawa. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you very much. Give it up for Secretary Ralph Recto, everyone. Indeed, we are on the road to becoming a prosperous economy, and the Philippines has sealed its position as a frontrunner among emerging economies in the Asia-Pacific region. As we prepare for the first panel, it is my duty to remind everyone that presentations of the economic agencies will be available for download from the webpage of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Investor Relations Group. You may scan the QR code at the back of your ID badges. And for those who would like to follow this at home or for those who would like to review this later, the Philippine Economic Briefing is also being live streamed at the Facebook page of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, as well as on the Facebook pages of the Department of Finance, Department of Budget and Management, National Economic and Development Authority, RTVM, and other participating agencies. Now, I know you are all excited to listen to the panel, but before that, kindly switch your mobile phones to silent to avoid interruption. And now, may we call back to the stage for the first panel that will talk about shaping a macroeconomic landscape conducive for investments. This panel will look at the Philippines' macroeconomic landscape that makes the Philippines ready and viable for investments. Once again, we welcome back to the stage Finance Secretary Ralph Recto. He will be joined by the very dynamic Department of Budget and Management Secretary Amena Pangandaman. Our panel will also include our brilliant National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan. We will also be joined by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Senior Assistant Governor Iluminada Sikat. And we have a very special guest joining the first panel. It is no less than International Monetary Fund Resident Representative Ragnar Gudmundsson. And to moderate the first panel, may I call on stage the Chief ASEAN Economist of Nomura, Mr. Yuben Paracueles. Ladies and gentlemen, our first panel.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back here. I did the same panel about a year ago, so it'd be great to hear the updates from the economic managers. At Nomura, we see the Philippines as one of the bright spots in Asia, and obviously a lot of Secretary Recto's presentation covered the reasons why. But we are also cognizant that there's quite a bit of risks, both externally in particular. So I want to sort of discuss how the economic managers are planning to navigate these risks and make the economic outlook a bit more resilient. So let's start. I guess I'm going to go with Secretary Recto first. For investors and ratings agencies, the medium-term fiscal framework was a very important guidepost at the start of the Marcos administration. And you mentioned there was a bit of a recalibration of the targets over the medium term. So I just want to get your thoughts on what was the thinking or the rationale behind the changes and how realistic are these targets going forward?
Essentially, what we did is to make it a little bit more realistic. I think the growth projections, number one, were too high, which did not consider the elevated prices globally and higher interest rates. Not to mention we have two hot wars and probably also a trade war. And because of that, we thought that it might be best to reduce those growth targets to more realistic levels, anywhere between 6 to 7% for this year. Now, having said that, the position also of the economic managers is to be fiscally conservative, because if you have high growth targets and you miss your revenue targets, then your fiscal deficit increases and you will be borrowing too much. So I think it was better for us to reduce those growth targets to a more realistic level, considering all the external factors. And for this year, we're still optimistic that we can hit the 6 to 7% growth.
Okay, thanks. And I guess the important point there is it's still on a declining path.
That is correct.
And it's still intact over
correct.
the next few years. Okay, shifting to the BSP, I guess, Senior Assistant Governor, a lot of investors are asking about the currency. Obviously, it's moved alongside the rest of the regional peers, given the strength of the dollar as probably the main driver. So what's BSP's assessment of the currency and what's the outlook going forward?
Thank you, Eubin, for asking that question. Actually, the BSP is closely monitoring developments in the currency market, given the recent depreciation of the peso. Well, together with the other, as you said earlier, together with other currencies in the region, following the delay in the easing of the Fed Reserve's monetary policy. But at this point, the BSP, I would like to reiterate the FX policy of the BSP. We do not target any specific exchange rate level. We just let the market determine the level of exchange rate. And what we look at when we enter into the market is that we look whether there is presence of market stress. Because if we let the market stress to be left unattended, this would affect inflation expectation, and that's something that we are avoiding. You know, so we look at market stress, we consider fundamentals, and we also look at you know, what's happening around the area. Are we the only ones depreciating or not? Given the fact that all of us are being affected by the current position of the Fed Reserves, I think this is only temporary, and eventually, once you know, things clear up, it will be the fundamental that will determine the level of exchange rate.
Thanks, ma'am. That's very clear. Moving on to Secretary Mina, I guess for you, would be interesting if you could give us an update of budget execution so far this year. It's been pretty good, especially for the month of April. Spending, if I remember the numbers, were up like 30% year on year. But we know there was an episode last year as well that there was some underspending and affected growth, I think, in the second quarter of last year. So could you give us an update, and is there a risk of underspending coming back again this year?
Oh, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On the part of the budget execution, yes, there was some kind of a decline last year in terms of spending, but the agencies were able to provide catch-up plan by third and fourth quarter. Now, for this year in 2024, what's important to note is that the 2024 budget was already prepared by our cabinet secretaries. So all of their priority projects and programs were included in this year's budget. So with that, they will actually implement those projects on time. Secondly, in the General Appropriations Act, we included a provision on early procurement, which is also included in our new Government Procurement Reform Act. We already institutionalized this because before it was only a circular from the Department of Budget and Management, but now it's already included in the new Government Procurement Reform Act. Now, agencies can already bid out their projects by the time we issue the National Expenditure Program to Congress. So that will give them time to actually bid their projects, and by the time we have the General Appropriations Act, they can already award the same. And of course, lastly, much of the project really, or the budget is really intended for digitalization. And then all of the national government agencies has provided a budget for that purpose. And then we expect those amount will increase efficiency in terms of government spending and implementation of their projects.
Okay, so no risk of underspending coming back this year.
No, in fact, in January of this year, we already released more than 80% of the budget. So we expect by now that all or even most of their projects are already bidded out and ready for implementation.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so that'd be a nice segue to my next question to Secretary Balisacan. On the growth outlook, we saw the Q1 GDP numbers. There was a little bit of a softening on the investment spending side, some easing on construction activity. So do you see that as a sign that maybe the infrastructure implementation has been slowing a little bit, and do you think that's going to turn around for the rest of the year to drive growth higher?
Indeed, we saw a slowdown in the investment in the first quarter relative to the comparable quarter in the last year as well as the last quarter. No? But that is not that's not from the government side. That's not the public sector spending for infrastructure. Actually, continued to be double digits, slightly less than what was in the comparable quarter last year. But the bulk of that slowdown is actually coming from the private sector side and I think we know the story there. The high policy rates in the previous quarters are beginning to be felt. Were beginning to be felt last quarter, and I suppose also toward the second quarter. But with all the things that are moving, going on right now, I would expect that would reverse in the coming quarters. All the public projects, the infrastructure flagship projects of government are in full swing. About a third of those are now ongoing, and another third of that are in various stages of implementation, and we're preparing the feasibility studies and pre-feasibility studies for the remaining ones. And as mentioned earlier by also by Sec Ralph, the public-private partnership code has the IRR of that has been completed. There are still remaining ones that we are firming up, but largely that I think has created a lot of expectations, enthusiasm from the investment community, as would be related to by confirmed by our PPP center here. There's a lot of interest going on. And so even as we are constrained by our fiscal consolidation efforts, the private sector, we believe, will come in quite strongly in the next coming quarters. I think that overall, the investments would, in the coming quarters, would firm up as we hear from, for example, from the Bangko Sentral, eventually reducing the policy rates as we succeed in managing, continuing the downtrend in the inflation, particularly addressing the food inflation.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. So speaking of interest rates, we'll probably get to that in a bit more with the BSP. I want to get Ragnar's point of view on this. I know the IMF in the recent spring meetings, there's been some recommendation that emerging markets like the Philippines do not have to be following the Fed too closely when it comes to waiting or kicking off their rate cutting cycle. Do you think that applies for countries that run current account deficits? In other words, countries that still rely on external funding to plug the gap, which means that they will also need to keep interest rate differentials relatively stable to avoid pressures on the currency. So do you think that that recommendation applies to the specific case of the Philippines?
Okay, so I think the suggestion not to follow the Fed too closely, it needs to be understood in the context of efforts to tame domestic inflationary pressures. And so when considering the path of monetary policy and policy interest rate decisions, what we are saying is that a central bank's decisions, the BSP's decisions in this case, should first and foremost be data dependent and driven by domestic price considerations. And from that respect, as Secretary Rector was mentioning, the overall decline in the inflation numbers that we've seen in the first 4 months of 2024, with headline inflation down to 3.8%, core inflation down to 3.2%, all these developments are quite encouraging, and they're moving in the right direction because we are now back within the BSP's target range, which, as you know, is between 2% and 4%. So, the trends are encouraging. However, I think, we need to be aware that there are still upside risks to the inflation outlook. And these upside risks stem from geopolitical tensions, from higher commodity prices internationally, and also domestically from some demands for higher wages in particular. So I think this is why our view is that the BSP should probably maintain a sufficiently restrictive monetary policy stance until we are really firmly within the BSP's target band. So that's the general recommendation. Of course, what you mentioned on the Fed, what the Fed decides is important because interest rate differentials have an potential impact on capital outflows, and a higher policy rate in the US affects the decisions of investors. And if the interest rate differential is reduced, this can entice some investors instead to decide to put their money in what they consider as less risky assets in well-established markets with deep liquidity. So, if there are capital outflows, these can translate into pressure on the currency depreciation pressures, and this can have an impact on the current account deficit through the higher cost of imports. So, that's the reality. But at the same time, if you're talking about the current account deficit, we also need to think about the fact that some depreciation can also support the exports of the Philippines, which in turn has a positive impact on the current account deficit. So I think the key here, and this was pointed out, I think, by Diwa Ginigundo, is as long as we avoid a sharp or a prolonged depreciation, the impact on inflation remains manageable. I would add also that what's very important in the case of the Philippines, the exposure of the Philippines to foreign investors is more limited than other countries. For instance, if you consider, the share of foreign investors in the local currency bond market in the Philippines, at the end of 2023, it was only at about 5%. And this compares with a country like Indonesia, where the exposure is closer to 40%. So in a way, the Philippines is better shielded from these evolutions linked to volatility in the international capital markets. And as Secretary Rector pointed out, the latest international issue in the international capital markets for an amount of $2 billion was generally considered a great success, and it attracted considerable interest from foreign investors. So I think, in terms of, what's happening in the Fed, of course it's something that a policymaker needs to be aware of, okay? But I still think that what is most important for the Philippines really is to address, the volatility caused by the Fed's shifting stance by focusing really on ensuring that inflation expectations in the Philippines remain well anchored. That's the number one objective. And maybe there's one final point I would like to make with regard to inflationary pressures in the Philippines. What the Fed decides may be important when inflation is really driven by demand. But in the case of the Philippines, inflation is in very large part related to supply shocks. And it's really related to higher commodity prices in particular, and also higher energy prices. And what does that mean for monetary policy? Well, in fact, if you want to address inflation, you need a mix of monetary and non-monetary policy measures. And from that perspective, I think it's very important, really to ensure that, efforts to facilitate the imports of cheaper food items are encouraged so that we can mitigate the negative impacts of higher food prices on more vulnerable households. So that's an important consideration. And finally, also, so that the Philippines' exposure to volatile commodity price shocks is reduced, I think it's over the medium term, investing in the productivity and the competitiveness of the agricultural sector.
Okay, thanks. Great, interesting points there, Ragnar. Completely agree. Access to international financial markets and domestic markets is not an issue at all for the Philippines. At this point, I think we can open it up to questions from the floor. I think there'll be mics that are going around, so if you just have to raise your hand and identify yourself, we can take a couple of questions, and then we go back to the panel again.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I'm just going to pop in to help assist with your questions. We would just like to remind everyone, when you ask your question, please go to the microphone stand. I believe we also have members of the press here. Please state your name and your designation or your office, and to whom you would like to address your question. And we would also like to encourage everyone to please focus your questions on the theme specifically for this panel, which is ensuring a Philippine macroeconomic landscape that is conducive to investments. And with that, we open the floor. I believe we have a question from this gentleman.
Magandang araw po. Ako po si Tomoaki Takeshita from Daily Manila Shimbun. I would like to ask Secretary Rector on your resolution to solve VAT refund program for exporter companies, including registered business enterprises. As you know, even though Philippine tax code has VAT refund system, but in reality, BIR want to refund it even by conducting a tax investigation against applicant company. So we, like foreign companies, keen to solve this problem. So can you explain how to resolve this problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, moving forward, if you're a registered business enterprise and you're an exporter, what we did in the Create More law together with Secretary Go is to exempt you from VAT so that you will not have to get a refund anymore. So that's the short answer to that. You will be exempted. As an exporter.
Can I one follow-up question?
Okay.
It means there are differences among government agency. For example, PESA said cross-border doctrine still exists, but BIR doesn't think so. So what is your position on cross-border doctrine matter?
In the Create More bill, it would be a separate customs territory like Clark, Subic, not necessarily PESA. There will be certain areas which in the past, in their charter, were identified them as a separate customs territory. Okay, so that would be that concept now will be followed under the Create More law.
Okay. I
Hope
think that
that answers your
sufficiently
question,
answers your question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
I think we can take one for this round, and then we'll get back to the panel.
We see one, the gentleman over at the left side.
Hello. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, I'm delighted that I was able to attend this Philippine economic briefing, and I would like to congratulate the economic team of the President and for consistently, getting about our consistent economic growth from the time of Pinoy onwards. And I saw my friend Secretary RC also served, I think, in 2 or 3 presidents. What's more, aside from DBM Secretary Amena Pagdana, we have also Senator Rob Recto. Well, by the way, my name is Rick Samaniego from the Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare. Now, as a balance, we've been attending a lot of economic briefing, ease of doing business, but what is lacking really is the representation of an independent private sector representative from the consumers. We, on the ground, has received a lot of, suggestions and complaints, and no other than Senator Recto. I think medyo naiwan mo ito, boss, yung batas about consumer welfare. Kasi po, right now, we have solved, in fact, practically the problem. Not all of them of ease of doing business through ARTA. And I'm sure our friend from the foreign here was invited in the 6th anniversary and the others and the like. So we really make business in the Philippines as much as possible as easy for you, because all the ingredients were already given by our economic managers. Our, I think, World Bank representative hit it exactly that the main problem really is still on the ground. Medyo mataas po yung mga presyo, hindi po ganong nararamdaman. But then, ginagawa na po ng paraan. Sasalita po ako ng Tagalog para maintindihan naman ng mga kapwa Pilipino nating nanonood na walang representasyon sa Private Advisory Council ni Presidente. Kalimihan po ng nakapaikot kay Presidente ang mga nagpapasweldo, nagbibigay ng trabaho sa mga sambayanang Pilipino. Pero po ngayon, alam nyo, dahil po sa powerhouse economic team ni Presidente, palagay ko magagawa ng paraan para magkaroon ang representation ang consumer. Tayo po yun. Now, ano ba talagang main challenge right now? Electricity, water, and the like. Now, if we can fast-track economic growth consistently, what we need really is for us to improve our internet connectivity.
Yes, sir. Siguro po we can ask Secretary Recto to respond. He had already mentioned in his beautiful keynote how we are also addressing consumer concerns. Secretary Recto, would you like to address po yung advocacy po ni sir on consumer issues?
I think the suggestion is well taken. It is good that we have more consumers, members of the different boards that we have in government. In fact, I filed many bills along those lines na mabigyan din natin ng boses yung ating mga consumer. No? At, in fact, yan ang pinag-uusapan dito on inflation. Kanina pa, there was a distinction between core inflation and headline inflation. And I think that's a very important issue. And yes, I also agree with the gentleman that you need to have more internet connectivity. And for every 10% of the population that have access to the internet, that's a corresponding 1% growth in GDP. So yes, so I agree with the suggestions of the gentleman.
About 91% of the subscribers of the telcos, I'm sure you know, are prepaid subscribers, and
correct.
most of these are Filipinos.
That's
And the
correct.
9% is, 9% is postpaid. I have to another question. Sandali lang po ito kasi I'm really glad na kasama natin si Senator. Siya po yung nakipaglaban sa consumer.
Okay, sir. Ano po yung question natin, sir? And because we have 2 more panels to go. Yes, sir.
Okay. He was been successful in creating a lot of taxes, yung VAT. But this time, meron din po siyang sinuggest doon sa data naman sa internet na magkakaroon uli ng tax. And I'm sure na pag-aralan maigi ito ni Senator Recto na makakabuti sa ekonomiya natin. But nevertheless, may impact po ito sa ground,
Sige po.
sa consumer. Kami ho papasa niyan.
Siguro
Kaya
po this
kung-
can be addressed, sir, by Secretary Rector, or if not, maybe from NEDA. And then I think after that po, we have to proceed to
Yes.
panel number 2. Yes, sir. Would Secretary Rector or Secretary Balisacan like to respond lang po
Well,
briefly?
thank you po. Before
Yes.
that, thank you. I hope
Thank you.
that there is a
Thank you, sir.
representation from the consumer private sector. Salamat,
Yeah,
RC.
salamat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, the Senate did pass the measure, the VAT on digital services. This will be discussed in BICAM, but this will only be for for foreign corporations. So we're talking about the Netflix, the Amazon, so on and so forth. So the idea is to level the playing field. If the brick and mortars are paying a VAT, then I suppose there will be those in the e-commerce space that should also pay the same taxes. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think we can go back to the panel discussion. We have.
Sorry,
there's one
if
more
I may,
question.
sir, for the Finance Secretary, my name is Ian Saison. I'm with Billonavio. I just have to ask you this question. You've given a very rosy forecast on where the economy is headed. I'm wondering, to your mind, what are the biggest headwinds that will prevent the Philippines from reaching that forecast? And if I make a comment, the executive has always come out to know what it's doing, what it wants to do, where it wants to put the money. But it seems Congress has a different mind. Do you think that's the biggest stumbling block for the Philippines, why it's always been on the runway?
Yeah. So first, externally, the biggest challenge would be external headwinds. Like I said earlier, you have 2 hot wars ongoing. We don't want a third one. You have other geopolitical tensions. You have a trade war with the West and the East as well. So I think these are the biggest threats as far as the Philippine economy is concerned.
Internally.
On the second point that you made, that is always a given between executive and Congress. And I've been in both sides. I've been in the House, I've been in the Senate, I've been in the executive before, and I'm now in the executive as well. So that's always a given. It's always a fight for fiscal space when you propose a budget. Congress, we live in a democracy. Congress can always amend the proposals of the executive, and I think we're better off because of that.
Sorry,
Check and balances, yes.
Yeah, last. Personally, what do you think is achievable by the end of the Marcos administration? How big is the economy going to be? Where is unemployment going to be?
Yeah.
Thank
Well, the most important number I mentioned earlier is that poverty incidence will go down to 9% by 2028. The economy will roughly be double what it is today by 2028. And like I said, by 2030, we will be the 13th biggest consumer market in the world.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So we still have a bit of time. So I want to focus on inflation, which seems to be an overarching topic for all of those things that have been mentioned. And maybe I'll start with Secretary RC on the inflation outlook. Can you give us a bit of a report card in terms of the supply side measures, non-monetary measures that have been done, and how effective have they been to bring down inflation pressures?
Thank you. Yeah, as mentioned earlier by our colleague from IMF, big part of the inflation, particularly food inflation, that we experienced in the past quarters was coming from the supply side. No? And that's one, primarily due to uptick in world prices, particularly for staple like rice. Second, that was also induced by protectionist measures arising from the El Nino, where the major exporting countries tried to reduce their exports in an effort to protect their domestic consumers. But on the other hand, there were also domestic challenges, supply bottlenecks, and also policy and regulatory issues. And the government, particularly our president, addressed that issue early on. Last year, he created the Interagency Committee on Inflation and Market Outlook to task NED and other agencies to monitor the market, the prices, the supply, the imports for basic commodities. And we report to the president periodically. We have almost monthly discussions on the policy and the issues and the responses, the solutions to these problems. And one of the outputs of those discussions and monitoring was the issuance last month of this Administrative Order number 20, which address the administrative issues, particularly the administrative procedures and policies governing the timely and efficient importation, timely and adequate importation of agricultural commodities, particularly our staple. Because what we noticed was that while we are short of production, short of what's needed for consumption at affordable prices, the importation was often inadequate and coming in late or too early. So in other words, it destabilizes the importation process destabilizes the market more than what we intended to achieve. So the effort was to simplify the procedures, administrative procedures in issuing sanitary and phytosanitary measures, for example, that are required for the importation of agricultural commodities. Okay, so that's one. On the other hand, we are also addressing the longer-term issues and low productivity in agriculture, as already mentioned earlier. And if you look at the budget for the Department of Agriculture, for example, during the Marcos administration in the last just 2 years, 69% increase in the budget, total budget. There's no other sector that has received that much of increase. And so the next issue for us is to ensure that that budget will lead to increases in productivity. If you are seeing that they are going into the right spending, for example, better and more efficient irrigation systems, addressing the lack of logistics for agricultural products, and so on and so forth. Then this should be able to reduce the cost of food and also reduce our dependence on imports.
Okay, thanks. So two-pronged approach, short-term and long-term measures. Going back to BSP, ma'am, so obviously you're an inflation targeting, your mandate is inflation targeting. In the short term, I think the BSP's projection is a slight hump in the inflation numbers for the next few months to slightly above 4% before it's coming down by year end. But you're also noting that there are some upside risks. So how worried are you that these risks are materializing?
Before I respond to your question, I'll just like to emphasize that managing inflation is a very good thing to achieve because if we are able to manage inflation, we can bring down interest rate, by bringing down interest rate, we can spur economic activity, and followed by increased employment, definitely improving the lives of Filipino. Now, you said earlier, yes, based on our baseline forecast, we see that inflation will be within the target range, but then there are upside risks, which Ragnar mentioned earlier. And given that upside risk, the BSP has decided to sufficiently maintain a restrictive policy stance in order to ensure that we anchor inflation expectations so that it will not result to further second-round effects. Now, you mentioned earlier, indeed, we are anticipating that higher inflation rate will be observed from May to July, but thereafter, we are projecting that inflation will revert back to the target range so that at the end of the year, average inflation rate based on our risk-based adjusted outlook, we foresee inflation to be within the target but on the upper end of the target range. That is precisely the reason why the BSP must be very careful not to bring down interest rate too early, or else we may not be able to address some of the upside risks that we are seeing in the future. But eventually, once all these actions of the BSP together with the non-monetary policy of the national government in addressing the supply side, we will be able to bring back inflation to the target range for 2024 and 2025. And I think that would be good for the economy, barring all other unanticipated or unexpected global developments that will impact again or challenge our ability to respond.
Okay, thanks, ma'am. I want to bring in maybe Secretary Recto on, because you're a member of the Monetary Board as well, being the Finance Secretary. What is your view on interest rates? When do you think should it start coming down? Do you agree that it's possible that could happen at the third quarter, as previously mentioned by Governor Eli in the past meeting?
Yeah, that's very much possible. But let me add, I think the representative of the IMF said it so well already. It all depends on the inflation outlook, number one, and I suppose what the Fed does. Those spreads shouldn't be too different between the U.S. and in the Philippines, or else you might have flight to safety, as mentioned earlier as well. No? But yes, it seems like inflation is going down. It used to be about 8.2%. It's down to 3.8%. It's well within the 2 to 4% band. So it's possible that you may have a rate cut this year and possibly more rate cuts next year. Surely, I don't expect interest rates to go any higher. If not, there's time that it'll start be going down. And maybe 150 basis points in the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you, sir. I want to ask Ragnar one question, and then we'll go to more long-term reforms with Secretary Mina and Secretary Arce. So Ragnar, going back to the outlook on the currency, in the current global environment where there's so many risks and there's so many things that are affecting the dollar, but also the emerging market currencies, do you think now is actually a more appropriate time than ever to allow more FX flexibility than targeting a more stable exchange rate?
Okay, I think, yes, so I think that, what we tend to consider is that foreign exchange rate flexibility is really a country's best first line of defense against external shocks. It's the best line of defense, and it's also what helps basically an economy adjust to the external environment. So foreign exchange rate flexibility should be taken as a first priority. And it's the combination of foreign exchange flexibility with a credible inflation targeting regime that really matters, and to anchor expectations of investors. And what we've seen in the Philippines in recent years is that this combination of foreign exchange flexibility with the credible inflation targeting regime has been key in contributing to the perceived soundness of the Philippines' macroeconomic policies. So I think, we have to hold the line on that front, and, combining flexibility on the foreign exchange rate regime with a continued commitment to ensure price stability.
Yeah, great. Okay, final two questions from me, and then I guess we can have one or two more questions from the audience. Like I said, on more long-term reforms with Secretary Mina. Secretary Recto has already mentioned a lot of the fiscal reforms that are ongoing from the DOS perspective, and I think that's well understood. What I don't get a lot of questions from investors are budget reforms, which I think are equally important. So if you can give us some of the key reforms that you're watching in your department, and how's the progress so far?
Well, some of these are part of the LEDAC, or the Common Legislative Agenda. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Congress for ratifying the new Government Procurement Reform Act. It's a 20-year-old law, and I think it's high time for us to amend and make it more flexible. The Congress ratified it last week. So that's one of our budget reforms that we're really pushing since day one. Second is the cash budgeting system. We would like to ensure that our budget, once we put it in our National Expenditure Program or General Appropriations Act, it's implementation ready. It has gone through all the process from planning up to the management part. Third is we're still pushing for the PFM reforms. We have IMF here and Asian Development Bank who's been helping us. We will come up with a roadmap soon, 2024 to 2028. Included in this is the digitalization of our budget and treasury management system. And then lastly, we will again still push for the right sizing of the bureaucracy. It has been part of a legislative agenda, and we hope that when the Congress returns this July, it will be part of their calendar. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Quick follow-up, is there a timeline on the cash budgeting
We hope to pass
system?
all of this by this year.
This year, wow, okay,
Yes,
that's very
with the
ambitious.
help of our friends from the Senate and the House.
Okay, great, okay. Not sure what happened to Secretary RC. I was going to ask him the next question. So I guess maybe now is the time to open up to the audience again for maybe one or two questions for our panelists. Okay, there's one over there. Please state your name and the person you're addressing your question to.
Ida Chongson, Management Association of the Philippines and Institute of Corporate Directors. This is actually for Secretary Balisacan, but anyone can answer this. IMF did mention about the 2 points in terms of lowering cost, and I heard about the power and, of course, the food, produce. Last year, rice inflation is 3%. Last April, it's 23.9%. So, well, we all know to attract investors, cost of production as well as inflation should be addressed. I know we've been talking about inflation, but would like to get a more micro, or should I say a deeper understanding on what moves are we expecting to improve, particularly lowering of the power and, of course, the food, particularly curbing on the rice inflation. Thank you.
Okay. With regard to the rice, we expect rice prices to go down by 20%, maybe by September. This would entail, well, one, increasing production, and second, reducing tariffs. So I think we have a game plan in place as far as that is concerned. With regard to power, there have been some decisions of the Supreme Court with regard to electricity prices. What we intend to do is to lengthen their ability of the producers to be able to get those revenues. Just to lengthen them, because we're keeping an eye on inflation. But the bigger problem would be on rice. And that is something that we think we can have a grip on and handle, and we expect those to go down between July to September.
Secretary RC. I believe that she addressed the question to Secretary RC. But ma'am, would you like to repeat your question just for the benefit of Secretary Balisacan?
Yes, thank you. Earlier, IMF mentioned lowering of costs, particularly the two. One is food and one is power. So I would like to know what government is doing in terms of the two, most especially rise inflation, which was last year, April of last year, is 3%, and this year is 23.9%. So it seems to me that we have to have drastic measures in terms of lowering the cost of rice. Thank you.
Inflation. Reducing the cost of inflation for electricity, power, and rice. Okay. Well, yeah, the price of rice, domestic prices of rice have been a challenge for the past couple of months. As we have seen, inflation there was the major contributor to the overall inflation. But it's simply because the world prices of rice have been rising since early last year. And that, especially early last year, the second half of last year. And today it's still rising, and the domestic prices are simply following that world prices. As you know, the Philippine rice market has been opened by the rice tariffication law. Yet it is expected to those prices, world prices, are expected to go down by September this year, and so we expect that inflationary pressure from rice to start coming down as we approach the year ends. In the case of power, that is a tricky matter for us because, as you know, the electric and power sector is fully private. Unlike in our neighbors, where a big part of that sector is state-run. No? So it's basically reflecting the market fundamentals there, particularly the price of fuel that we import. On the other hand, our approach is that we don't want to return to the old price stabilization law, which became a major problem fiscally and economically. And so the pressure for government to come back and bring back that oil price stabilization law again, for us in the economic manager said we don't want to go there because that has been a major problem of economic instability in the past. So, on the other hand, we want to protect the vulnerable groups, the low consumers, the low-income consumers, and the riding public by providing assistance of subsidies when world prices and power prices are abruptly increasing. That's, to us, is the most fiscally feasible way of addressing the problem.
Thank you, sir. And the panel has the honor of being asked a question by the great Ramon Ang.
Good afternoon po. I'd like to share with our audience here today why is it the fuel prices and power prices in the Philippines is higher compared to our neighboring countries. As you know, San Miguel and Petron is in Malaysia. In Malaysia, the prices of gasoline is 20 pesos per liter. In the Philippines, is 60. Reason, Malaysia subsidized 1/3. The other 1/3 is taxes. Philippine government impose taxes. And our neighboring countries don't impose taxes. But if you look at it on an equal basis, our prices, without the subsidy and without taxes, is even lower than Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. It's also the same as power. Our power generation compared to our neighboring countries are lower, but we impose taxes on the power sector, on fuel, and we also don't subsidy. We don't give subsidy on power. That's why our power prices are higher. But if you are foreign investors that want to come to the Philippines, that is not a reason for not coming. You should come and put up your own power generating plant in your factory, which is very easy to put up. And Philippine government encourage all big energy consumers to put up. For example, if you want to put up your own nickel processing plant, you put up your own power plant. It's welcomed by USEC Marasigan. I think our country's market force compared to our neighboring countries, are still subsidizing heavily on fuel and power. Why are they able to do it? Because Malaysia has its own oil production. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. Our oil production is only 6,000 barrels per day compared to our neighboring countries, average 1 million barrels a day. That's why they can put in subsidy. Philippines, we don't have oil. But we have a very big reserve in West Philippine Sea. That's why they are very interested on the Philippines. So let us not let go of it. We should protect our territory. Salamat po.
Salamat po. So, there was no question. But let's all give him a warm round of applause. On that note, I think it is time for us to conclude this panel. We would like to say thank you to Finance Secretary Ralph Recto. Let's all give him a warm round of applause. Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman. Secretary Arsenio Balisacan of NEDA. BSP's Illuminada Sikat. IMF's Rudmar Gunmanson, and our most esteemed moderator, Mr. Paracueles. And we would like to invite the panel to please go to the front of the stage for a very quick photo op before we proceed to the second panel. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give them a warm round of applause. So thank you very much. That concludes our first panel. But to our guests, remember that we have 2 more panels to go, another exciting set of discussions. May we request the audience to kindly take their seats once again. The second panel will be on the discussion entitled Driving Investments to the Philippines, Removing Roadblocks and Increasing Competitiveness. On that note, may we call on stage our most esteemed panelists. We have with us no less than Secretary Frederick Go. He is Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs. Joining Secretary Go is our Department of Trade and Industry Secretary, Alfredo Pascual. They will be joined by Department of Agriculture Undersecretary Asis Perez. And we also have with us today Ms. Rizalina Mantaring, member of the President's Private Sector Advisory Council and Independent Director of Ayala Corporation. Pardon me, just so we all remember, that is Ms. Rizalina Mantaring. Mantaring. So I was correct the first time. And this Philippine Economic Briefing is unique because for the first time, we will also have off-panel resource persons. And for our off-panel resource persons, let us also welcome Department of Environment and Natural Resources Secretary Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga and Public-Private Partnership Center Executive Director Maria Cynthia Hernandez. And this panel will be moderated by no less than the President of the American Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, who is also Capital One Philippines President and Head of Global Operations, Ms. Sarah Murphy. And on that note, may we kindly request everyone to once again take their seats so that we can begin our second panel discussion.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second panel today. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of this forum and event, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Today's been fabulous, great topics, great conversation, and I think you can expect the same with this afternoon's second panel. Just to kind of preview what you can expect, I'm going to warm up the panelists with some questions, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So please give thought to some questions you'd like to ask our panelists this afternoon. With that, let's get started. All right, my first question's for Secretary Go. Since your office is new, what have you accomplished so far in improving the Philippines' competitiveness and ease of doing business? And what do you aim to be able to bring to the table on the medium time horizon?
There are a few things that we constantly talk about. Reforms, programs, or laws, or executive orders that we have come up with to enhance the ease of doing business. The first one, and perhaps the most obvious one, would have to be the PPP code, the PPP law. This renews a 29-year-old build, operate, transfer law. And I think that the private sector has really been waiting for this update on the PPP law. So I must say that perhaps is the first thing that comes to mind. And of course, the finalization of the implementing rules and regulations of the PPP code. There were a lot of concerns around the IRR of the PPP code, but we, together with our friends from NEDA and the PPP Center, we really ensured that we would come up with IRRs that would promote public-private partnerships. Second would have to be all the executive orders that that streamlines government services. There's, of course, the DTI's green lanes for strategic investments, the ease of paying taxes, the streamlining of telecommunications infrastructure, the streamlining of infrastructure projects. We can go on and on about these. Maybe after that, I would have to highlight something that we really worked on, which was the boosting the capital markets or improving the stock market reforms, such as shortening the settlement cycle from 3 days to 2 days. We implemented short selling in the Philippine Stock Exchange. Again, 27 years from the first time it was first proposed. We also have worked with the Securities and Exchange Commission to shorten the IPO process timeline, as well as to simplify the IPO requirements. Talking about, I guess, the new office, I think our goal is really to do what Secretary Recto mentioned earlier, the whole of government approach. It's almost, it's really just focusing on a few important priority agenda of the President and working with all the agencies and all the departments to make sure that they happen.
Thank you so much. Secretary Pascual, supply chain diversification into ASEAN is likely to be accelerating, especially with the ongoing U.S.-China trade wars and the prospects of Trump 2.0. The Philippines has not been a major beneficiary so far, unlike Vietnam and Thailand. Are there government plans to capitalize on this theme?
There's still an echo, you know. I'm not hearing the question clearly. But I think you're asking about the shift of investments to Thailand and Vietnam, and why not the Philippines?
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are right now strengthening our the economic framework of our relations with the various countries that are our partners. We have two major, China is still the #1 trading and investment partner of the Philippines, and we're in the process of enhancing the framework of our trade and investment relations through ASEAN. The U.S. is an important partner as well, economic and more than economic partner. And we are trying to strengthen that relationship and getting the support of the U.S. through investments from the U.S. private sector and with support from government agencies. And I think the engagement with the U.S. has been in the uptick. Last year, the President visited Washington, D.C. We've had discussions. A Biden presidential trade and investment mission was committed, and that commitment was honored with the coming of more than 22 top executives. Companies, more than 22 companies with the top executives coming to the Philippines, and we had discussions. That was March 11, and following that, we have just the recently concluded Indo-Pacific Business Forum. And from that business forum, there's a very good representation of important U.S. government agencies. For example, the development finance, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation is represented, and we have been assured that they are willing to support their U.S. investors coming to the Philippines. And to prove that, they're setting up an office in Manila soon. Okay? The other important development was the trilateral summit that happened in April. And that summit included Japan, in addition to U.S. and the Philippines. And there were a number of commitments made. In the economic and business side, there is the commitment on the part of the U.S. and Japan to support our Luzon Economic Corridor development. And we got reconfirmation of this during the Indo-Pacific Business Forum with the special advisor of the president, Hochstein, reiterating the commitment of the U.S. government to support the development of the Luzon Economic Corridor, and also the commitment of the Trade Development Agency to develop the feasibility study of that project, and the International Development Finance Corporation to support the financing of the project. So we are strengthening our economic engagement with the U.S. To the point that we hope we will be able to attract investments from the U.S. Private sector, and also from other countries who will partner with U.S. investors and Filipino investors. Japan is, of course, they're also coming in and supporting us.
Thank you. On the topic of the Luzon Economic Corridor, Secretary Go, can you tell us a little bit about how we should think about that and how it is going to facilitate trade and investments in the island?
Yeah. Okay, let's start with that. The GIP is actually the G7 Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Development. So it can involve up to 7 countries. So far, the active participants are the United States and Japan. I understand that the UK has also called in to ask and see how they can participate in it as well. The focus areas of the G7 would be in ports, rails, renewable energy, and infrastructure in general. The flagship project that they are looking at would be the rail connecting the Subic port to Clark Airport, to the Manila port, and to the Batangas port. That is the flagship project, a cargo rail. And aligned with that, they're looking at what businesses or industries can be developed along that line. They have a particular interest in renewable energy. They believe that as industries are set up or are based around this four stops, there will be a huge demand for sustainable energy or green energy, and it's something that I would say is number 3, really on their list. And the investments can be anything within this corridor, within the Luzon corridor. For example, the $500 million investment of Cerberus in the former Hyundai shipyard, now known as the Aguila Shipyard, has already started. There are already 3 locators in the Aguila Shipyard in Subic. And just 2 weeks ago, you may have seen in the news that we announced that HD Hyundai, the largest shipbuilder in the world, is putting up a shipyard in Subic that will bring back shipbuilding in a big way to the Philippines. And the other thing I'm told is that the Aguila Shipyard actually has the longest dry dock in the world. So that's another competitive advantage that we have. So for example, one of the Luzon Economic Corridor projects that have already, shall we say, benefited or has already signed on would be that $500 million HD Hyundai shipyard, which would also provide us 10,000 jobs. So it's taking off, I believe. And what we are really pushing for now is the development of a new area in the Philippines, right? We've been promoting the Cavite, Laguna area for the last 30 years. And it has been very successful. The area now is quite congested. So now I think it's really time for us to promote industries and investments to go now into Batangas, Clark, Subic. You know, there needs now new areas of development that we can direct investments to. Like, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, the semiconductor industry. They're all looking for a new place to base. And so with this, we have a code for it, SCMB rail. So, you know, it's now easy for us to think. If you have new big businesses that you want to put up, you can put them up in Subic, Clark, or Batangas, for example. So that's really what this development of the Luzon Economic Growth Corridor is about. Thank you.
Thank you. Undersecretary Perez, obviously this weekend we had some severe weather. How do we think about the strategies of government to mitigate the impact of La Nina and climate-proof agriculture and fishery production?
Oh, well, you know, to mitigate La Nina or El Nino, government must think in terms of 5-year program. You see, if La Nina will happen this month, as it happened already, what kind of measure can you impose or propose when it's already an event? That will require a certain engineering intervention. Ensure that the sector is capable of mitigating the impact, that's engineering, but it's the resiliency that we have to work on, really. Is the sector resilient enough to cushion the impact of La Nina? That's the question. Because we cannot have control over it. It's a natural phenomenon. What we're doing right now, specifically on, say, on the seeds, is to make sure that we'll have rice that are tolerant to weather. Maybe a rice that has a short gestation period. Like we're looking at 90-day maturity for our rice, and that'll make a lot of sense because the less exposure you are in these climate changes, then it's better for you. And also, we're also doing what we call advanced information with the use of satellites, so we can predict the weather better. But predicting the weather is one, but disseminating the information is the other challenge. You know, to make sure that farmers are ready even before the storm comes. Like yesterday's event, it's something that we failed to predict. We thought that it was that the storm is going to traverse the Pacific, but lo and behold, it's 200 kilometers inside, and so better prediction and better dissemination of information would do probably, I'd say, measures right now, but really the way forward is to prepare well, and that will take both engineering and mitigation measure that will take some time, including reforestation, for instance. It's good that Secretary Loizaga is here, so that's one area that we need to work on.
Thank you. Riza, what are some of the main issues the private sector, particularly PICC, is working with the government on, and what are some of the main achievements through this collaboration?
Okay. Well, PICC actually has 6 groups, which would perhaps indicate what those issues are. So it's infrastructure, digital, tourism, jobs, healthcare, and agriculture. So the first 4 have to do with driving economic growth. Are there other industries aside from tourism? Because that was given special mention. Yes, there are. And one of the tasks of PICC has been to identify those industries and what's needed to drive their growth. So the last two, healthcare and agriculture, have to do with human capital. Okay? Agriculture, healthcare, obviously, the health and well-being. Agriculture has to do with food security. And jobs is also involved from the standpoint of skills, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So I would like to emphasize that the PICC is an advisory group. We work very closely with the cabinet secretaries and various government officials because at the end of the day, they make the decisions and they will also be responsible for a lot of the implementation. So I'd like to thank the cabinet secretaries, the directors, agency heads for their receptiveness to ideas and offers of help coming from the private sector. So what are some of the things that we've worked on? Infrastructure, okay? Infrastructure, our logistics cost in the Philippines is 25% of sales costs compared to 10% in the rest of Asia. And a lot of that has to do with our infrastructure. So a lot of the work that the infrastructure team has been working on has been foundational the last couple of years, working on rules, regulations. Secretary Go mentioned the PPP IRR, which we provided input on. And this year, the focus will be on upgrading, rehabilitating our core infrastructure, roads, bridges, essential services like water and power will see critical upgrades. And a lot of this, the private sector will be involved in through PPPs. Okay. Now for digital, of course, there's the collaboration between the government and private sector in building up our telecommunications infrastructure, but there's also a recognition that government has to move to digitalization. Digital transformation has to take place. So to this end, the PICC has been able to forge partnerships with the National University of Singapore and University of Arizona to train 10,000 government officials on digital leadership and transformation. That's expected to begin starting anytime now, actually. Okay? Aside from that, we have forged partnerships with the tech giants, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, you name them, they're all there, Meta, to provide training, certificate courses, and they've committed to provide 50,000 certifications free of charge. Okay? All of that there. Now, tourism, we see this really as a very high growth area. So it's a lot of focus on tourism, and a lot of the work they've been doing has been on how to make it easier to come to the Philippines, but also get around the Philippines, and how to get to our tourist spots. So a lot of the work they've been doing has been, some of them quick wins, like the One Health Pass for the e-travel portal so that you don't have to fill out so many forms, which was worked on together, again, with the government. All of this I'd like to emphasize together with the government. And so now they're continuing work on improving the infrastructure, roads to the tourist destinations, making it easier to come here, like e-visas, that's now under pilot with the Indian nationals. Hopefully that will be rolled out to more nationalities, nomad visas, student visas online, so make it easier to come here. Now the jobs group, the focus is on how do we generate more jobs across different industries, and we've identified priority sectors. But two of the key initiatives I'd like to mention are, one is, they call it JOBS, J-O-B-S. It's really holding of job fairs all over the country. This is done weekly at malls all over the country. We've already processed thousands of applications. The idea is to match job seekers with available jobs. On May 1 alone, there were 20,000 job seekers that applied for jobs in those various fairs. And this is, again, together with the DOLE and other government entities. But there's also an initiative for returning OFWs to be able to place them in jobs and match them with jobs. Okay? The other initiative is the private sector Skills Development Corporation. This is patterned after the upskilling programs in other countries like India, Malaysia, Singapore. We studied all of that. The aim is to bring together industry, academia, the government to upskill our population, because there's a recognition that there's really a lack of skills now. We're falling behind. Okay? Good young population, but we're falling behind. So the aim of that is bring in industry, build industry skills councils that will develop training pathways, okay, define training curricula, and then work with the government on certification, accreditation of training programs. So that has been incorporated. That is currently undergoing the startup process. That's already been incorporated. On healthcare, one of the very first directives of the president was address our nursing shortage. So a lot of it's addressed towards that. How do we address the shortage of 90,000 to 115,000 nurses that we have now? Providing nurses for both the local market and the foreign market, because we know they're going to leave, right? And not to mention the healthcare BPOs. So we've had, there's a whole set of programs, but what has been accredited and already approved is the Clinical Care Associates program, so that underboard nurses, and there are thousands and thousands of them, can move towards being used in our healthcare system. They're also working on improving PhilHealth, etc. A lot of initiatives going on. For agriculture, we've had critical problems, as the Undersecretary knows. So a lot of the effort has been towards how do we ensure that our food supply is there? How do we improve the yield of our seafood industry, of our corn industry? Okay, but at the same time, they have contracted a consultant, McKinsey in fact, to build a national food bank, a digital food balance sheet, which will show us at any time, okay, what our food pattern is, how it's being used, where it's coming from, and so on. This is expected to be completed in 2 years. So those are some of the things that we've done.
Thank you. Secretary Pascual, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership was finally ratified by the Philippine Senate in February of 23 and officially took effect in June of 23. As we're nearing the 1-year mark since ratification and taking effect, what are some significant updates or milestones that we have had happen since we've joined the FTA?
Well, in terms of hard data, we're still in the process of gathering the needed information on how much this RCEP has contributed to the export. There are some indications like certificate of origins issued by the Bureau of Customs. These are requirements, for export to countries that are members of RCEP. But the more important thing is the work we're doing to make sure that the benefit of RCEP is imbibed by our companies in the Philippines, especially those that are export-oriented. We have 3 pillars that we are relying on for purposes of enhancing the availment of benefits from not only RCEP, but all the free trade agreements of the Philippines. We are holding an annual international trade forum, which we started last year, middle of last year, and then we'll do it again maybe third quarter of this year. It was launched with the president, and we get the representatives of business organizations attending to spread the word, about the benefits that they can obtain to enhance their exports. Now, the other is the educational and advocacy campaign that we are undertaking. So far, we have done about 25, what we call in the Filipino, usapang export. This is a discussion of exports and how we can enhance the volume of exports through the availment of the benefits of a free trade agreement like RCEP and the others. And lastly, we are in the process of establishing international trade advisory centers in the regions. So to get close to our enterprises operating outside Metro Manila and provide them with hand-holding, advice, mentoring, and other support services. The other important effort that we are exerting related to RCEP is our import surge monitoring system. Because there is, of course, there is a concern. While we are using this free trade agreement to increase export, there are concerns also of the entry of foreign products into the Philippines. So we are monitoring this. There are dozens of business organizations and companies that have already registered in this system, the import surge monitoring system. In particular, the sectors that are interested in this monitoring are our steel sector, cement, wood, ceramics, and the like. So this is an important system that we are the support system that we are providing our manufacturers in the Philippines, those who are manufacturing for the domestic market, so that we can protect their market in cases of dumping from foreign producers that are availing of the reduced tariff under RCEP and the other free trade agreements.
Thank you. Undersecretary Perez, what are the major hurdles in improving agriculture productivity and ensuring food security? What are some of the priority programs that your department is spearheading towards improving productivity?
Of course, the major goal is to ensure that there is available and affordable food for everybody. And ancillary to that, we have to make sure that everybody in the value chain should benefit from the same, meaning the farmers, those who are in the trade, those who are in the processing, and ultimately the consumers. They should benefit from stable prices and available food. But, I was a bit, the challenge was even more because Secretary Recto mentioned that the goal is to reduce poverty by 9%. And lo and behold, the highest poverty incidence in the country is in the farmer and the fishing sector, 30 and 31% respectively. So this is a big challenge for the department. Now, how do we address that? So there are probably, I'd say, we identified two major challenges. One kind of challenge can be addressed by improving our investments. For instance, we need to increase our irrigation investments. We need to irrigate 1.2 million hectares of available land. We need to invest on post-harvest. 30 to 35% losses in post-harvest is a lot. If only we can invest there, then, you can see the tremendous difference in terms of the value to be generated by addressing post-harvest losses alone. The other one is improving on the logistics chain. So I was listening to Secretary Go. I think the agriculture sector will benefit a lot from efficient logistics system. We are transporting everything in bulk. And so that one, if that can be addressed, that can effectively reduce cost by about 10%, and probably the value of whatever we produce is, the cost of logistics is also reduced by another 10%. And again, that's a large one. So those can be addressed easily by, I would say, appropriate investments. But there are areas that needs a whole-of-nation approach. For instance, low productivity of the soil is not simply because of farming. It is also the result of, lack of trees in the forest, for instance, that provides the soil. Even if we do a lot of irrigation projects, if there is no water, which is primarily coming again from the trees and the mountains, what will happen? And climate change. Our farmers can plant, and then they can be very, very, very hardworking, but also they have to pray a lot, because there are things that are beyond their control. And so these are just some of the challenges that we're trying to hurdle with different programs that we have.
Thank you. Secretary Go, one of your initiatives that was recently announced were plans to implement measures to shorten the processing time of mining permits. Aside from this, what other reforms are in the pipeline for the mining sector?
I will answer in behalf of Secretary Tony Loizaga Yulo. The way the DNR is looking at this, they're looking at it on three levels. First is they're completing the geomapping of the resources of the Philippines. This will enable the government to prioritize areas, and this also reduces the risk of the mining investors. A lot of the mining investors, when they come in, they're taking a huge risk, not knowing what minerals they can find underneath the soils. So completing that geomapping will also attract investments into the mining sector. The second part of the strategy is to, as you said, to streamline the permits. The DNR has come up with one excellent idea, I think, which is instead of making the permit process sequential, it is to make it simultaneous. So as many simultaneous permits as possible, as we can all easily understand, will shorten the application of permits process, no? Because sequential always necessitates one, A needs B, B needs C, C needs D, and so on. So this can really shorten the timeline. The goal here is to shorten the permitting process from probably what people believe now to be 5 to 6 years, probably, to shorten it to 2 to 3 years, in the words of the good secretary. But of course, we're hoping she can even shorten that to 1 to 2 years. The third part of this is to bring us up the value chain of the mineral process. No? Instead of just focusing on the exploration or the exploitation of the minerals, we should really be looking at attracting investments in the downstream process. The most obvious for us would be the downstream process of processing nickel and copper. Why? Simply because we are now the largest exporter of raw nickel ore to the world, and we supposedly have the largest copper deposit mine here in the Philippines. And this can increase the value of our exports by perhaps 10x. If you look at the example of Indonesia, for example, they went from exporting $3 billion of raw nickel ore a year to now about $30 billion worth of processed nickel. So in a perfect world, the dream, I suppose, of the DTI and of the whole entire government is that we move up from raw nickel to processed nickel to electric batteries and then electric vehicles. So, of course, processing electric vehicles in the Philippines would be our end goal, at least for today. In today's point of view, that should be our end goal. And we have to start somewhere. And that somewhere starts with, I guess, streamlining the processing of mineral exploration permits. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we're ready to transition to Q&A, so hopefully folks are warmed up and ready to step up to the mic. I'm going to invite Margo back on stage to help facilitate.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I'm just going to pop in again. And we'd just like to remind our guests once again that as the floor is open now for Q&A, please go to the microphones to ask your question. And please also let us know to whom you would like to address your question. And I see that we have Malaysian ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Malik Castellino, to give the first question.
Thank you, Margo. Once again, my congratulations to Secretary Go, Secretary Pascual on the stage for creating a very conducive and open environment for investments here by foreign countries in Philippines. I've seen it grow for the past 6 months and to a year, and I really congratulate you on the work well done. My question is simple. A lot of work been done in the past 6 months on the halal industry, especially by DTI. I would just like to see, how do you see this industry moving forward? And of course, to Secretary Goh, are you looking at maybe possibly making the halal industry one of the strategic trusts of your team? Thank you. Once again, congratulations on the work well done.
Well, the halal industry is seen as an area that could contribute to the country's industrial production. We have strengthened our effort to develop the halal industry in the country by organizing a dedicated task force to do this. And we are getting partnerships with very important consumers of halal food. Our number one supporter, of course, is the good ambassador who asked the question, the ambassador from Malaysia and the other Muslim countries around us. We're promoting halal, not just food or items for Muslim, but we're saying halal is for everybody. For food, for example, halal is supposed to be clean, nutritious food. Okay, but halal is not just food. There is halal cosmetics, there is modest fashion, there is tourism-friendly, Muslim-friendly tourism, and many other areas that will follow the principles of halal. Now, the other important enabling environment that we have created is the establishment of a network of certifying bodies. Because unless you have the certifying bodies which are accredited by international bodies as well, and then it will be difficult to promote the products produced here as export to other countries. So we have the task force doing it. We have created an enabling environment. We are promoting the knowledge of what halal is all about by holding fairs, training sessions, etc. We have a dedicated training team at the Philippine Training Institute, Trade Training Institute, which is part of DTI. And with this ecosystem that we're establishing, we are confident that we'll be able to promote the development of halal industry in the Philippines. Of course, with the support of our friends like the good ambassador.
Thank you. We have another question. Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Jasper Tan from the Daily Manila Shimbun. My first question is addressed to Secretary Federico. I'd like to know how far will the government commit and prioritize pushing for charter change, even though a majority of Filipinos do not support it?
We would also like to remind our friends from the press, this panel is specifically on driving investments to the Philippines, removing roadblocks and increasing competitiveness. Ma'am, I was just wondering, would you have a question more specific to this specific topic?
All right. Okay. My second question is for Undersecretary Perez. Sir, what significant cooperation is the DA planning to discuss with Japan during the first meeting of the Philippines-Japan Joint Committee on Agriculture by the end of the month?
Well, looking at the current priorities of the department, we're looking probably at, for more investments on machineries. You see, we're under-mechanized. Our mechanization rate is only, I thought it was 2.4, but I was corrected recently by my staff. They said 2.4 for rice, but actually it's less than 1 for the entire country because we're looking at one horsepower per hectare. And to be able to mechanize and modernize, we need a lot of investments on machineries. And so this is probably a topic that we will look at when we discuss with our Japanese counterpart. The other one is on post-harvest capabilities. Again, we know that Japan is very good at it. Processing is an area where a lot of improvement can be had. And so on top of production, those are probably the 3 other items that we will be discussing with our Japanese counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm retired General Esperon Hermo. We have, the Philippines consumes about 10 million metric tons of steel every year. And yet, we have no smelter in the Philippines. I think this will go to Secretary Go and Secretary Pascual. I have heard about your plans for processing plants. How are we doing with this? We have, of course, Asia Steel, but it is not a processing company. It imports billets from China and processes them for local consumption. And yet, we have so much iron ore in the Philippines. Second, we also have so much of nickel ore, and we export all of them. Good, very good. But we must look at what is with the nickel ore. We have lithium in nickel ore, and that is more valuable than the nickel itself. I think the answer again is processing right here in the Philippines, not on the permit side of mining. We already have a lot of mining. My third question is on the West Philippine Sea, but I will reserve that for another time. Secretary Recto has already recognized it. Our economic predictions are very good, and he said, what are the headwinds? Of course, we have one in Ukraine, one in the Gaza Strip. There's a third one right beside us in the West Philippine Sea. Do you want to de-escalate or you want to escalate?
Thank you, sir. And
Thank you so much.
I'd also like to share with General Esperon that we actually have off-panel resource persons. We saw earlier that Secretary Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga is here. Is she still here? Okay. So perhaps to Secretary Go.
And may I say that Chairman Ramon Ang has just said, if energy is the problem, we have so much in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think, unfortunately, the DNR Secretary has already stepped out of the room. So I'll try to answer that. But I'm sure my friend just right in front of me would like to answer that question of General Esperon. But you did point out Steel Asia. Actually, that's the company I think you were referring to. They just opened they're opening a facility, they just opened one in Cebu, and they're now working on another major facility in Lemery, Batangas. I think we agree with you that we need to move up the value chain. So from just mining the minerals out of our ground, we need to start processing them domestically rather than exporting them as raw ore. As mentioned earlier, the multiplier value of the export alone, if exported, could be as high as 10 times the value of the raw ore. Unfortunately, you mentioned that the need is not to explore more minerals, but the truth is, for us to attract the major investments in the downstream, we need to ensure the supply chain. We need to ensure that there is enough raw material to justify the huge investment in processing plants, which is why we need to streamline the permitting process in order to ensure a stable, consistent, and sustainable supply of raw materials. I have actually mentioned that 2 out of the 7 sectors that we are prioritizing are exactly what you talked about, which is mineral exploration and downstream mineral investments, and the steel industry. The steel industry is definitely there on our list because it is, as you correctly pointed out, right now, largely imported. So any facility we put up in the Philippines to produce steel is import substitution, which helps the country's foreign exchange, as well as helps keep the jobs here and keeps the investments here. No? So there are actually several companies that are putting up steel plants as we speak. I just gave an example of the one of Steel Asia earlier. There's also a major steel plant of about $400 million, a 20 billion peso steel plant coming up in Sarangani that is also going to be inaugurated in the 3rd quarter of this year. So we are pursuing the steel investments, but I think that the big ultimate goal that you're talking about, which is to have a full-sized smelter, is something that's in the pipeline, and that's a work in progress. But it's, to be honest, it's really easier said than done, and we'll need a lot of support from a lot of agencies and a lot of market forces to support it. But it's something that is currently being discussed. Thank you.
Let me just add regarding steel. Last week I had the opportunity to visit Steel Asia's newest plant in Cebu. And based on the presentation that I gathered from Steel Asia, the plan is to go backward and produce the billets from scrap iron. The Philippines still has a lot of scrap iron, but the important thing is the kind of machine or device that will be used for melting scrap iron. It has to be electric furnace rather than induction furnace. Most of the steel plants are using induction furnace, which is not environment friendly. And Steel Asia has the objective of increasing their capacity for melting scrap iron for production of steel. They have a large plant in Cebu, in Compostela, and ultimately they're looking at a total project cost of 65 billion pesos to develop that integrated steel mill, and also produce the other products that are right now fully imported. Like not just rebars, but also the construction construction members like I-beams.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think that's all the time that we have for the question and answer portion for this panel. And so we'd first like to acknowledge once again, we had our off-panel resource persons. Department of Environment and Natural Resources Secretary Maria Antonia Loizaga was here, but we still have in the House Public-Private Partnership Center Executive Director Maria Cynthia Hernandez. And of course, let's give a warm round of applause to our panelists. Secretary Frederick Go, Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, Secretary Alfredo Pascual of the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Agriculture Undersecretary Asis Perez, and Ms. Rizalina Mantaring, member of the President's Private Sector Advisory Council and Independent Director of Ayala Corporation, and of course, our amazing second panel moderator, Sarah Murphy, President of Capital One and President of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. And may we request for our panelists to be joined by Director Cynthia Hernandez on stage for a photo op. We would like to remind our guests that we have one more panel. For those of you who are following at home, or if you would like to review this Philippine Economic Briefing later on, the Philippine Economic Briefing is being live streamed on the Facebook pages of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Department of Finance, the Department of Budget and Management, the National Economic and Development Authority, RTVM, and other participating agencies. Presentations of the economic agencies are also available for download from the web page of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Investor Relations Group. You may scan the QR code at the back of your ID badges. So we would like to request everyone to once again go back to their seats as we prepare for the third panel. For our third panel, this is going to be our final panel discussion. We will navigate the Philippines investment landscape, and we shall take a closer look at how we are transforming our infrastructure network to support investments and growth. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. We have Department of Public Works and Highways Secretary Manuel Bonoan. Joining him is Department of Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista. We also have with us from the Department of Information and Communications Technology, Undersecretary Jeffrey Ian D. And for the Department of Energy, we have Assistant Secretary Mario Marasigan. And to moderate this session, we have with us today the Global Head of Real Assets Group for Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Shikhar Jain. Ladies and gentlemen, the third panel.
Hi, very good afternoon to everyone. As has been said several times today, I would like to repeat, Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies in the region and in the world. Over the last few years, we have seen that macro stability and robust reform narrative has actually propelled it to one of the topmost investment destinations, at least from a mindspace perspective for foreign investors. We expect to see this translate into more FDI coming in across a lot of different sectors, but especially around infrastructure. Various reforms that have taken place, including allowing 100% of investment to come through in asset classes like renewables, has led the way for more investments to come in the infrastructure sector. My first question around this would be to Secretary Bonoan. So DPWH obviously plays a very important role in enabling the development in provinces. Now, a lot of the investment that has come so far has benefited the Metro Manila and the NCR region. Could you help us understand how the FDI coming in could go towards developing Visayas and Mindanao regions, and what are some of the initiatives or projects that you are looking to help develop those regions?
Well, thank you very much for that question. But, well, there's so many projects that the Department of Public Works and Highways is actually implementing in the Visayas in Mindanao, and of course Luzon for that matter. But just to start it, I would just like to start with a major project that we intend to deliver this year, which is a very significant project, and it is a bridge project in Mindanao, and we call it the Pangil Bay Bridge Project. This is a project that will cut short the travel time from Lanao del Norte to the other side of the bay in Misamis Occidental. At the moment, you have to go around through a 100-kilometer road, and that will take you about 5 hours. Now with this bridge that we intend to deliver by about the second or third quarter of this year, which is about a little over 3 kilometers, this will cut short the travel time by only 7 minutes. So this is a very significant project that will interlink the regions in Mindanao, and we call it a game changer project for one. So very soon, this is a project 3.5 kilometers. This will be longer now this will now be longer than the San Juanico Bridge, which is already about just over 2 kilometers. And this is in Mindanao. Now, let me go to another game changer project that we are calling now. We are now in the process of bidding the start of construction of a major interlink bridge. And this is what we call the Bataan-Cavite Interlink Bridge. This is a 32-kilometer bridge that will cut across Manila Bay. And again, this is a game-changer project that will not only promote economic development faster in the north and south corridors of Metro Manila, but also relieve traffic in Metro Manila. We are now in the process of bidding the first segments of this project now. And this is a 32-kilometer interlink bridge, which I understand will be the second longest bay bridge in the world. We're hoping that this bridge will be implemented several years, but I think it will be substantially completed within the term of the President. So there are many other projects that I'd like to elaborate on this time. We're now in the process of preparing a big interlink bridge as well in the Visayas, and which we call the Panay, Guimaras, Negros Interlink Bridge. This is going to be a 32-kilometer bridge, and there are two bridge segments that will be implemented here. One is Iloilo to Guimaras, and then Guimaras to Negros in Pulupandan. And we are now preparing it. The detailed engineering design is now being implemented. And we hope to bid the first segments of this bridge towards the end of the year. Now, this is going to be a very significant game-changer project because it will interlink two major islands in the Philippines. This is the Panay and the Negros Islands. So it is it is going to be a major interlink bridge to spur the economic development in these two regions and in the Visayas as well. We are also in the process of finalizing the design of another bridge that will connect Cebu City and Mactan. This will be the fourth bridge to support actually the economic development in this area. And we are now in the process of finalizing the design. We hope to bid it out also by this year, next year. And then there's another bridge actually that we are planning to implement in Mindanao, and this is actually the Samal Bridge that will connect Davao City to the island resort of Samal, and this is also a game-changer project. Now, there are many other bridge projects that we are implementing right now, but I would like, again, a very significant project that the Department of Public Works is implementing towards enhancing connectivity and reduce transport and logistic costs. And we are referring to the rehabilitation and improvement of the backbone network of the national highway in the Philippines, in which we call the Maharlika Highway. This is a 3,000-kilometer stretch of roads starting from Ilocos Norte, going around Cagayan Valley, all the way to Zamboanga City. Now, this road was constructed way back during the first term, of former President Ferdinand Marcos. Now, many of the segments on this vital road network is already congested because of economic development. Traffic has grown up. So we are now transforming this backbone road of the national highway into a seamless travel to reduce transport and logistic cost. And we are now in the process of one of the main features of this this road project that we're implementing right now is there's going to be a big realignment of a very congested section in the Cagayan Valley region with the construction of a 6-kilometer tunnel and the realignment of a section that will involve also the construction of another 10 bridges. This is now underway. Thank you to the Japan International Cooperation Agency over there for the support that has been extended to finance this project. This is going to be a game-changer project actually in the Philippines. So again, there's so many projects that I would like to line up. We have also some projects in Mindanao, like Davao City Bypass Construction Project that will address the traffic congestion areas in Davao City, and of course many other road projects in many parts of Visayas and Mindanao. Thank you for now.
Thank you. I think you mentioned a lot of game changer projects. So maybe I can talk about a game changer privatization that was recently kind of successfully concluded in the country. Secretary Bautista, you obviously registered a very big win with the successful conclusion of the NAYA privatization. Complex process. Could you walk us through a little bit of the high points of the process, key learnings, and how should investors think about future privatizations that may come through?
Thank you very much for that question. This project is very close to my heart since when I was in the private sector, I really wanted to improve and modernize Manila International Airport. No? This is a 30-year project in the making. No? I know that this started during the time of President Ramos, the privatization of Terminal 3. No? There were so many problems that we encountered. And then after that, there were moves to continue the privatization. No? During the time of President Arroyo, President Aquino, and even during the time of President Duterte, there were attempts to do the privatization. And I'm very happy that the administration of President Marcos is successful in awarding this. No? This project is the shortest in terms of getting approval from NEDA. No? It took 6 weeks since we have submitted the project to NEDA for approval. And then we were able to attract investors and did the bidding by December 27 and awarded it to the winning bidder on March 18. And now we're looking forward to the operations and maintenance by September 14. No? There's a lot of learnings on this project. No? One, we were able to work closely with a transaction advisor. ADB supported us. It took ADB to advise us and prepare the terms of reference for, I think, around 5 months. No? And we were able to do the roadshow in Singapore and in Paris. We were able to attract 9 interested parties, no? And we were able to do the bidding fairly and transparent, very transparent bidding. No? And I would like to thank all those who really assisted us. No? ADB for one has helped us. The Public-Private Partnership Center has supported us. And I'm very thankful for our people in the Department of Transportation that really work hard to make this thing happen. No? This operations and maintenance of Manila International Airport will provide the government with around 900 billion in revenue for the next 25 years. No? San Miguel Group, I'm happy that Mr. Ramon Ang was here earlier. They will invest initially 88 billion pesos for the first 6 years and a total of around 125 billion in 25 years. No? And that would increase capacity of the airport from now 32 million passengers per annum to 62 million passengers per annum. It will also involve increase in air traffic movement from 38 to 48 movements. No? So this is around 20% increase in the capacity of the airport. This will also involve expansion of the existing terminals. Terminals 1, 2, and 3 will be expanded, and this would result to a more convenient, comfortable, safe, and secure travel experience for our riding public. So many learnings from this transaction. No? This is a showcase of President Marcos' administration of encouraging private investors. No? And also, this is a showcase of implementing the PPP project of the government. No? So we're very happy for all the supporters, and we look forward to the takeover of the new NAIA Infrastructure Corporation by September 14. Thank you.
Thank you. So none of this infrastructure implementation actually happens without energy. So maybe Assistant Secretary Marsigan, if I can ask you, what we are seeing across in the region is that Philippines has been rapidly emerging as a sought-after foreign investment destination, especially around power and energy business. If you look at the various other Asian economies, how they have been able to attract this capital, wanted to understand from your perspective what role DOE can play in ensuring that that capital comes to Philippines vis-a-vis the other economies around it. Because this is the most critical part of actually being able to develop the infrastructure that has just been talked about, the various game changers.
Thank you very much for the question. The primary activities and programs that the Department of Energy is trying to implement is how to make the investment in energy projects be friendly to both local and foreign institutions. As such, we have to make sure that concerns and challenges, particularly on clearances and permits, have been addressed appropriately. So we have the implementation of the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop. It's an online permitting and clearance issuance procedure. The steering committee is actually being headed by the Office of the President. So we have to engage all government agencies that are engaged in energy projects to have this online platform in procedural process for clearances and permits. Aside from that, as you have mentioned earlier, we have opened up to 100% foreign investment in developing our renewable energy resources. And with that, we have seen some 22 project proposals already coming from 100% foreign investors. These are in the field of wind power development, and these projects, once they realize, this will provide us somewhere around 5,000 megawatts of wind energy projects, both located onshore and offshore. Aside from that, we do understand that for energy projects to come in, we have to facilitate the processing requirement on the other side, particularly on the local government side. So we are now revisiting our policies in certifying projects of national significance so that we can really proceed with a facilitating process. Aside from that, we know that power projects, particularly in the development of our renewable energy resources, one of the main component is the interconnection. We have to ensure the timely construction of our transmission facilities that will allow interconnections of all energy projects, even those located offshore. As such, the Department of Energy has created an ad hoc committee for transmission projects. We are trying to find ways and means on how we can facilitate the resolution of challenges that our investors come, particularly in terms of providing interconnection projects. Aside from that, we go to the ground. Once there are some local community problems in implementing these interconnection projects, we really deal with the local government units, even to the barangay level, to trace out what are the concerns on how we can really facilitate the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question may be to Undersecretary D. Digital infrastructure is a key component of any country's development today. I mean, if you look around the room and the number of people on the mobile phones, you know they all want it. So we've seen a successful phase of tower privatizations based on the tower sharing guidelines that had been put up. Do you have a similar thing in mind for sharing the OFC network among fiber broadband players and the potential impact that it can have for the broader population?
The short answer to your question, Shriek, is yes. We are already discussing with the Private Sector Advisory Council, for example, which consists of all the other telco players, regarding shared infrastructure or how to set up the policies for shared infrastructures in fiber optic cables. You're right, we successfully rolled out the common tower policy, and we believe that after this policy, there is more than 3,000 common towers already set up, and this year alone, we're looking at another 3,000 more. But you're right, the next phase should be in order to put a policy that will allow for shared infrastructure, especially in fiber optic cables. But let me add that more than that, we are also looking into the setting up a policy within the year on shared infrastructure, even on active network components. We're talking about radio units, for example. And for this to happen, we have to have a policy that reassigns discontiguous or to reassign or to rationalize spectrum to make sure that each of the spectrums are assigned to contiguous blocks. We are confident that if we do this, prices of telecommunications will go down, for example, because there will be less investment in radio units per telecommunications providers. The access also to spectrum needs to be more liberalized in order to allow for other telecommunications providers, for example, to make use of those spaces, which we cannot use today because they overlap because of the discontiguous assignments. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we're going to share fiber optic cables, but then there must be policy, which we are reviewing now, in order to push for more sharing of infrastructure, not only to passive components, but also to active network components.
Thank you. Just going back to Secretary Bono, and for all the initiatives that the department is already taking, how do you think the private sector can participate in those and help achieve them? Does it help? Would it help to get more private sector participation, to get funding early and see if you can execute it faster or more projects at one point? Would be keen to understand.
Well, thank you for that. We firmly believe that, to be able to implement efficiently and effectively all the projects that we're thinking about, I think we also need to encourage the participation of the private sector in all the major projects that we are undertaking under the Department of Public Works and Highways. To start with, the Department of Public Works and Highways has we call it High Standard Highway Development Plan, Master Plan. This will involve the implementation of about 1,800 kilometers of high standard highways and expressways in the country. So there's a lot of room for the private sector to come in and help us in implementation of this program. Start with, let me say that the expressway system network in the Philippines right now is just about over 500 kilometers, 532 kilometers to be exact. And these are only mostly in Luzon for now, around Metro Manila to start with. Now, under this master plan that the department is evolved, we plan to implement another more than 350 kilometers of expressways, not only in Luzon but in other parts of the country. And there are many potential areas now in the country that would need actually this kind of facilities to enhance mobility and to address traffic congestion in many areas. So this is where the private sector could come in and help us in the implementation of these programs, either through participation in what we call the solicited proposals or projects that we have identified, or the unsolicited proposals that the private sector can come in. And we would encourage actually their participation right now because this is enormous opportunities for them to participate, not only in the investment side, but also in providing technical services, consultancy services, and many of the other aspects in the implementation of our in our infrastructure projects. Again, investments from the private sectors are also encouraged, but I think participating it into the large portfolio of the infrastructure program of the department is so huge. They can really participate in all the other aspects of implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the energy part, just going back to what you had mentioned, Assistant Secretary Mahasigan, wanted to understand, apart from renewables, there's a lot of push around LNG, and it's expected to play a significant role in Philippines' energy structure. What kind of policies are you looking at to help those LNG imports, especially for power generation, but also for city gas distribution in future?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question on liquefied natural gas. Firstly, we're looking at natural gas definitely as a support technology for our renewable energy, particularly that natural gas facilities has that peculiar flexibility that could address the variability of our renewable energies. But we have certain policies that we currently develop. We do understand that our own Malampaya deposit is depleting. So the first act that we have done through the Office of the President is the extension or the renewal of our Malampaya gas service contract that will eventually lead to optimization or in terms of recovery of the natural gas in Malampaya area. But more importantly, to pave the way for the additional natural gas required not only by power generation facilities but also for industrial facilities, we have come up with a policy on the policy framework for the downstream natural gas regulation. In so doing, we have actually identified what are the necessary rules and regulation that needs to be implemented for an industry-oriented standards that will include safety procedures. Our policies also on the downstream natural gas provides for the identification of the roles that each and every entity involved has to comply with. That includes even the Department of Energy itself, but more importantly, the natural gas players. We have also envisioned in our Philippine Energy Plan the roadmaps, the activities, the programs that natural gas will play by 2040 and 2050. So we're looking forward to that. Then currently, we are monitoring 7 liquefied natural gas facility projects, 2 of which are almost in completion, but already serving some of our natural gas power plants. Thank you.
Thank you. Just continuing with the point around fuels and transition around energy, Secretary Bautista, could you comment on the plan for broader transition for jeepneys and diesel vehicles towards minibus and electric vehicles? I mean, what are the key challenges that you are facing and expectations and timelines when you expect this to be accomplished?
Well, this is regarding the public transport modernization program of the Department of Transportation. Right now, we have just implemented the first component of the privatization of the modernization program, which is consolidation. We have requested all the operators to consolidate as a corporation or as a cooperative. And then next to this is the route rationalization, which we will work closely with the local government units. And if we will be able to finalize the specific routes, that's the time that we will require the consolidated entities to replace the old jeepneys with the modernized ones. Right now, there are already around 7,000 modernized vehicles using Euro 5, Euro 6, or electric vehicles. And the plan is to replace this within 27 months to 36 months after the issuance of what you call the LPTRP, or the Local Transport Route Plan. So we are working closely with the different financing institutions, because this is one of the challenges, is how to finance the replacement of the old vehicles to the modern vehicles. We're working closely with Land Bank of the Philippines. I understand the President was here. Also, we're working with Development Bank of the Philippines. Mr. Mike is here also. And we are working closely with all the other stakeholders. On the electric vehicle, we would like to have more electric vehicles. There is an estimate of, I think we need around 300,000 vehicles, PUB and private vehicles. But the challenges include also having the charging stations. And I'm sure that there are already many interested investors. A few weeks ago, I met with a manufacturer of electric vehicle from Vietnam. They are willing to sell more electric vehicles at very attractive prices. No? So I think working with all the stakeholders, we will be able to implement the public transport modernization program. And we're looking at maybe 3 to 5 years before we can start noticing improvements. No?
Thank you. Energy transition, digital infrastructure, and even broader infrastructure is something very close to our hearts at Standard Chartered. So we'll be keen to see how this gets implemented. Maybe just one last question to Undersecretary D. For broader potential of data centers in Philippines, the progress has lagged a little bit, but want to understand how you're looking to attract investments, especially around AI and hyperscalers. We obviously already have a subsea cable network which can support this, and hopefully we are getting enough green energy also coming through to support green data centers. So just maybe your views before we close this.
Thank you very much, Rick. So just to contextualize your question, you're asking me about the potential of the Philippines for hyperscalers, right? And so my short answer is huge. Let me state the facts. First, Singapore has already put a cap on the number of hyperscalers that they can build in their country as a percent of the power grid, which puts Singapore already at the back burner of most new hyperscalers. Now let's talk about the other targets, Taiwan and Hong Kong as hyperscaler centers. Due to geopolitical issues, most Western countries cannot connect directly to them. Even though Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan had more submarine cables than us, that particular problem will not go away in the near future. So here is the potential for the Philippines. The Philippines has 11 submarine cables. We are the #1 destination for BPOs. These 11 submarine cables currently, but there will be 14 in the next 2 to 3 years. No? As TPU from Google, for example, Bifrost also is coming in. But what do we need to do in order to attract, to make this potential more probable, right? In order to make sure that we work on this potential. #1, of course, is we need to keep working on the submarine cable security because there's a lot of regulation there. Second, we need to develop our workforce, which Secretary Recto also already said. The Philippines average age is the Filipino average age is 25 years old, and we're all techies. So I think we can succeed on this particular endeavor. But the third and all the other departments are here. But the third most important factor for data centers and hyperscalers actually is power, most specifically renewable energy, because hyperscalers have a sustainable development goal target of being completely green by 2030. And so we need to factor this in and build more of the energy requirements, because according to the study of the ICT, for the next 3 years, the data center demand for the Philippines would be approximately 400 to 600 megawatts. And we need to produce this green energy for that many data centers.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. We're definitely looking forward to it. It clearly seems like it's infrastructure time in Philippines. With that, I think we have to wrap up the panel. Unfortunately, we will not have time to take questions. But thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And let's all give it up for our panel. Department of Public Works and Highways Secretary Manuel Bonoan, Department of Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista, Department of Information and Communications Technology Undersecretary Jeffrey Ian D., and Department of Energy Assistant Secretary Mario Marasigan, and our moderator, Global Head of Real Assets Group for Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Shikhar Jain. And we would like to call back to the stage members of the previous panels, and Secretary Recto. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for the moderators and panelists. And that concludes the 2024 Philippine Economic Briefing. We would like to thank our panelists and moderators, and most of all of you, our very distinguished audience. I'm Undersecretary Margo Salcedo, and it has been an honor to be your host today. Remember, everyone, think growth, think Philippines.